So here's a visual aid that a member of the RTD community shared with me. And it shows somewhat of a repetitive cycle of pause, cut, and then crash is typically the model. But one thing I found very interesting is that it's the buildup to the pause that then leads to the cut. And so if I was to just back up a little bit and just share my thoughts in reference to how this current cycle is playing out based upon the prior two trends that we can see from the 2000 and the 2008-09 time frame. In my opinion, what led to the pause, cut, crash trend was the debt binge that took place prior to reaching the pause. And so as we can see here, it's when rates were dropped lower than what is considered to be normal or ideal is when things become very problematic, because you have a decreasing of the interest rates, which spurs on the need for or the desire for corporations, as well as those that are interested rather in speculating, to take out more debt because the borrowing costs are down. Therefore, it encourages people to take on debt and to become more over leveraged than they probably really realize at a time when rates are low for the sake of greed and profit. And so as rates can go up, and so as we see here, prior to the pause in 2000, we had rates relatively low, looks like about 5%, give or take, which at that time was somewhat low, but it spurred on debt. Just as how things seem to work in this type of model here, where the cheap money leads to more borrowing, and then, of course, more malinvestment. It has to be sustained. But unfortunately, that's when we get to the problem where it looks like central banks or the Federal Reserve, more likely, once they cut off the spigot of easy money or cheaper borrowing cost and things begin to somewhat normalize, that's when things become problematic, because there is a drying up of the wells, or drying up as they turn back the spigot of easy credit or debt or encouraging debt. And then it becomes a problem, because most likely it's hard to sustain something that is being dialed back. And so if the whole economic boom is spurred on by debt, this being put into the economy to create jobs and all the things that they tell themselves or they tell us that what they need to do for the economy, once you cut that off, then there goes the driving forces behind this boom or the booms that have taken place before. And then that comes when they begin to pause. When they pause and cut off the spigot and say, okay, now we've reached a peak of sustainable growth or whatever, then everything that led to that growth was due to cheaper borrowing costs. Therefore, the whole idea of people borrowing more, taking out loans that they couldn't afford, especially here in this country where we are based upon consumption, not really much production from the average middle class family standpoint. So here we have, when the pause takes place, then that's when everything dries up. That's where things slow down and liquidity becomes a problem, to where there runs that pinch of no one really borrowing, because now you just went off of having lower rates that encourage people to take out mortgages, to buy new cars, to go out and take these trips or whatnot, as far as luxury items, because it was cheaper to do so prior to the pause. But then when you reach the top of readjusting interest rates to where it looks normal again, then that's where you have a problem with just not, having anyone take out new debt. So we're reaching that right now. So the fact that they are pausing to the far right at 2.25% and 2.5%, anywhere in between there, it's going to be problematic. And so once again, based upon the trend of the two prior recessions, it looks like we're going to run into the same type of issue, because once again, things are slowing down because they've paused, because they've induced and they've blown up a bubble, unless you continue to do more of the same that pumped all that hot air or easy money into the bubble. And so now we're reaching a point where they're talking about the need to possibly cut. And so I anticipate more of talks of cuts, but now what's becoming more prominent is they're talking about doing the same type of monetary easing prior to this next recession or next crash as officially announced, so that this next gray line that shows up doesn't happen to be 2 or 3, 4 times bigger than this last gray bar here. So once again, this trend here shows that there's a pause, a cut, and a crash all in the same time frame. The only thing we're lacking now is officially a crash, but it looks like they're about to begin cutting rates anyway and easing to prevent the next crash, which I don't think will work, just because, once again, I don't think it's going to be easy to get people to borrow at the same time that the economy is slowing down, spurred on by a trade war and all the other issues that we have in the economy. But once again, I think this is something worth taking a note of, just because, once again, it's not necessarily the pause and a cut that leads to a crash. It's the malinvestment and the dropping prior to the pause that blew up a bubble that unfortunately has to bust first before there can be any type of correction to what seemed like the new norm. But anyway, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think.